we are recording. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I am the International Program Specialist at the North American Association for Environmental Education, or NAAEE, and I manage the EE 30 under 30 program. And I'm also joined here by my colleague, Melissa Hopkins Taggart, who is our Director of International Programs.
Hi, everyone.
And we're also joined by Monet Verbeek, Verbeek, from the Institute for Learning Innovation, and she will be supporting the monitoring and evaluation aspects of this program. And Monet might have a few things to add to the session when we're talking about the year outcomes and the monitoring and evaluation section of the application. And so the goal of this session is to generally give you all an overview of this new program, the Changemaker grants, answer any questions you might have, and hopefully give you the opportunity to also meet some of your fellow alumni virtually here on Zoom. And this session is being recorded, and I will share the link to this recording later today when it's available. And so importantly, before we begin, I think all of you are muted right now, but please also be sure to keep off any video just so that we can help anyone with lower internet connections and reduce that bandwidth. And you can also open the chat box using this, this button here. And at any time during the session, feel free to type in questions. And we will also be doing some introductions and a couple slides here, so you can use that chat box to introduce yourself in a little bit. So in the next hour, we will first briefly introduce you to our organization, the North American Association for Environmental Education. We will give you a brief overview of what we mean when we say environmental education, or EE. And then we'll dive into the Changemaker Grants program. So we'll talk about the benefits the grantees receive, the grant requirements, and we'll also take an in-depth look at the application and hopefully give you some helpful tips for when you're filling out the application. And we'll leave plenty of time at the end for questions. If you have any burning questions during the session, feel free to leave them in the chat box, and we might take a few throughout. Otherwise, we'll plan to take most of the questions at the end. So first, we would like to thank you all so much for joining us, and particularly to those of you in the 2019 class, and I think there are a few of you on here who are brand new to this community. So welcome to all, but also welcome particularly to our newest class. And while we have you here, we wanted to give you all the opportunity to introduce yourselves and share a little bit about what you're working on. So in the chat box, feel free to introduce yourself and share your name, where you work, and what you're working on. And I'm looking forward to seeing who all is here. And you can, are people seeing the chat box? There we go. Tiffany is here. Hey, Tiffany. And as a reminder, if you're having trouble finding the chat, it should be on the bottom of your screen. You might have to click the three dots to bring up more options, and then the chat should show up. Great, Rachel, Sean, Kekashan. Lauren. Nicole, all the way from Denmark. Great. Yeah, it is great to virtually see everyone here. Great, so I'm going to keep going, but feel free to keep typing in introductions or chats. Oh, I'm backed up a little bit here. So yeah, it's so great to see many familiar faces and some newer faces, and folks from all over. So thanks again for joining us. So EE 30 Under 30 is a program run by the North American Association for Environmental Education, or NAAEE, and we have a wide range of programs and initiatives, from working to build capacity in environmental education, strengthening networks, linking research to practice, and a whole lot more. And we generally consider ourselves the backbone for the field of environmental education in North America. And but we are working more and more with organizations and educators all around the world. And so you can learn a lot more about NAAEE and our programs at our website, which is here on this slide. And building leadership is a really key priority for NAAEE, and that is how EE 30 Under 30 came about, with the goal to recognize and build the capacity of incredible leaders from all over the world who are using environmental education. And so we now have 120 alumni across 29 countries, and all of you demonstrate such incredible leadership and impact, and we're so excited to be able to continue to grow this program. And we'd quickly like to recognize EE 30 Under 30 supporters and collaborators. We've had several over the years, but particularly a big thank you to the Global Environmental Education Partnership and Wells Fargo. So before diving into the Changemaker grants, we wanted to briefly discuss what we mean when we say environmental education, or EE. And we hope that this might also help you as you're writing your proposals and thinking about how you incorporate environmental education into your work. So environmental education is not just about sharing knowledge. It's about equipping people with the tools, skills, motivations to be good stewards of the environment. And it's very much a learning process, and it's all about developing the critical thinking skills that are necessary to make informed decisions about our environment and about sustainability. So overall, it's not what to think, but how to think, and really focusing on systems thinking, on problem solving, and thinking across disciplines. And so environmental education also gives people the chance to learn about the environment and sustainability and the role that we play in all of that. Allows them to reflect on their values and attitudes, and even look at cultural differences in these. And again, it goes beyond sharing knowledge. It's also about skill building and also about behavior change. And so all of this is also about building bridges across these three pillars of sustainability: environmental, social, and economic pillars. And so when we think about environmental education, we are really thinking about how we can all contribute to a world that is sustainable and that meets all of our needs in an equitable way. So next, who is our audience when we're talking about environmental education? It's really anyone. Environmental education is a lifelong learning process, so it's for adults, children, really anyone. And it can happen anywhere. It can be within the formal school system or outside of school, in communities, nature centers, anywhere. So that was a quick overview of environmental education, very quick. And in the interest of time, we'll now dive into the Changemaker grants. And again, feel free to type in any questions at any time into the chat box. And I also want to take this moment to thank Wells Fargo again for all of their support, in particular their support to make this pilot year of the Changemaker grants possible. Okay, so the objective of the Changemaker grants program is basically to invest in your innovative ideas and efforts in environmental education. And we want to do this by providing both financial support and professional development. And this opportunity is open to all EE30 under 30 alumni. So all of you are eligible to apply regardless of your age or country. We definitely want to encourage all of you to apply. Now, we listed the 3 grant priority areas on the application. And so these are the 3 kind of buckets that, that we want the projects to align with. And we will be looking for projects that align with at least one of these priority areas. And so these priority areas are resilient communities, low carbon economies, and healthy ecosystems. And I won't go into these in detail, but there are some descriptions and rough examples of what might fall under each of these buckets. But we've kept these priority areas pretty broad in order to cover a wide range of environmental issues and approaches and EE approaches that you may be working with. And the important thing is that if you are having a hard time aligning your project with one of these, or if you're not sure whether or how your project aligns with one of these, feel free to reach out and we can help. We want you to be successful. And so if your project doesn't really neatly align with one of these, we'll see what we can, we'll see how we can work with you to have it align with one of these areas. But if you do need help with this, please be sure to reach out to me well before the deadline, ideally by next week if possible, so that I can be as helpful as possible. So next, what benefits will grantees receive by being part of the program? So the first, obviously, is financial benefit. We expect that we will award up to 15 grants ranging from $5,000 to $10,000 US dollars. And grantees will also receive training. So we will have 1 to 2 virtual training sessions in the spring of next year. So that would be roughly between February and April, roughly speaking, spring US time. And there will be 1 in-person training in October. And that in-person training will be at the next NAAEE conference in Tucson, Arizona. And so grantees will also receive a full scholarship, in other words, a fully paid trip to attend both that conference and the in-person training that will happen at the conference. And the topics that we will cover in the trainings are to be determined, but we're hoping that we can tailor them as much as we can to the needs of the grantee cohort. So grantees will also be part of a valuable learning community. As a grantee, you would have ongoing access to support from both fellow grantees, as well as us NAAE staff throughout the project cycle, as well as Monet at the Institute for Learning Innovation. And finally, when you share your project's progress and results through our network, through NAAE's network and other relevant platforms, we hope that this program can also bring you some great visibility for your work and organization, because sharing your results is an important part of this program. So we hope that that can help with visibility as well. So now for the requirements. So time check, okay. So grantees will be expected to have a sponsoring organization that you can receive the grant through. So this should be an organization that can receive a grant for you. And this can be either your organization or a partner organization. We have no requirements regarding organization type or location, but if this requirement might be an issue for you, we will consider grants to individuals on a case-by-case basis. But we definitely much prefer that you have a sponsoring organization if possible. And so if you have questions about this, just, for your specific case, feel free to reach out to us and we can work with you. But do note that if you are awarded a grant as an individual, you will be responsible for any taxes on that grant. So please keep that in mind. And so the next requirement is to attend all of the training sessions. So all of these training sessions that I mentioned earlier are mandatory. So that will be 1 to 2 sessions in the spring, and the dates for those are to be determined, but we will try to schedule them based on the availability of the grantees. And the one in-person session will be at the NAAE conference in October. So you will need to commit to these dates. The October dates are set, they are firm. And I guess just you should know that you might have general availability in the spring, that you won't be traveling the whole time, or know that you will be generally available to attend a couple training sessions in the spring. And for the in-person one, for now, we won't worry about any potential visa issues. We can address those later on. So your ability to obtain a visa to the US will not factor into the review process at all. And as I mentioned earlier, we will cover your travel expenses for the October training and the conference that will take place in Arizona. We will also ask you to share the progress and results of your project. And this could be on EE Pro, social media, or other news outlets, and we will definitely work with you on this. And finally, you will be expected to share a midterm report and a final report for your project. And we'll give more guidance on this with the grantees selected. Okay, and so with the timeline, applications will close midnight on December 20th, and that's US Eastern Time. And we understand that this is a pretty quick turnaround time for the applications, but we're really hoping to notify grantees by the end of January so that we can have projects start by April. And these will be 9 to 10 month projects running roughly until January 2021. And then we will close out with final reports by February 2021. Okay, so before we move on to the application, are there any questions about the requirements or the timeline?
Anita, you want people to use the chat box for that?
Yes, yeah. So if you have any questions, please type them into the chat box. We will be covering the application next. So if you have questions about the application, maybe hold on to those until the end. Yes, Tiffany, I did see your question. So how long are the virtual trainings? We are working on that. That will probably depend on what topics we want to cover and how many. So we have not determined the length of virtual trainings yet. And Melissa, I don't know if you have anything to add for that.
No, I think probably they would be no more than an hour each, just because of people's schedules. And then we would do some individual support as needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
And this is another question from Rachel. Would you consider smaller grant amounts than 5,000?
Hmm.
I can answer that
Yeah,
quickly.
go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I definitely think we would. I think this is really about what you all need, and we gave that range of 5 to 10,000 because we think that's kind of an appropriate range given the funding that we have. But on a case by case basis, if less, if a different amount is needed, we would entertain that.
Mhm.
And how strict is the timeline? Would projects that extended beyond the final report date be acceptable? Nina, did you want to answer that, or do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, I think my answer would be that I think there would be some flexibility on the timeline. I think what would be important is that you have some results that you can report on by the final report date. I think we don't
Yeah,
want like 2-year projects, for example. It could extend a
yeah,
bit beyond, but we do want you to be able to have something that you can report on um, by that final report date, and hopefully be close to finishing the project by that time.
yeah. And then is the in-person meeting a 1 day, half day, hour,
Yeah,
etc. from Sierra?
I can answer that. So the
Sure.
in-person training will be on the Wednesday before the conference. So the NAA conference normally starts on a Wednesday evening and runs until Saturday. And so the training will be that full day on Wednesday. So you would arrive, I would have to go back and look at these dates, but you would arrive in Arizona on that Tuesday of that week. The training would be pretty much all day Wednesday. Um, and then the conference will follow that.
Yeah, and it's about the training, but it's also about all of you getting the opportunity to network and be physically at the conference. It's such a great gathering for environmental education professionals, and it would be fully funded, which is really nice.
Mm-hmm.
This is a question from Charles. Is there a possibility for ground visits to our site projects, especially for the monitoring and evaluation team?
Good question.
Yeah, that would be so amazing if we could do that, and you're all spread all over the world, and what a great opportunity. I don't know that we would have funding to do in person on the ground visits. Our budget is fairly allocated, but we could definitely do some virtual consultation, and would be glad to.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Oh, more questions.
Okay, can we have one more? Okay, we've got some more questions coming in. So these are such great questions. Can we submit more than one application for different projects? Oh, that is a good question, Rachel. And by the way, this is our pilot year of this grant program, so we're going to be practicing adaptive management throughout as well. So these are amazing questions. What do you think, Nina? More than one application for different projects in person?
I would say that would be okay, and just probably just one of them would be awarded. But if
Yeah.
you have a couple different projects that you think are both great fit and they're two distinct projects, then sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's just a matter of, if you have the time to submit more than one, great. And then, but we would only fund one of those, like Nina said. Okay, we've got more questions coming in. Some of this, does the grant need to create a totally new and unique project, or can it build off of past or current projects?
Good question. And I'm not planning to go into this in detail in the application, but I was going to mention that it can either be a brand new project or it can be part of an ongoing project. It could be a piece or part of a bigger ongoing project. I think the key is though with your application, you need to be able to say exactly what this grant will fund and what the outcomes from this grant will be, if that makes sense, for this specific part of an ongoing project. If that makes sense.
And are there restrictions on funding expenses, honorariums, and contracts?
So,
go ahead.
We do not have any restrictions. We want to help you all. You know, we want it to be flexible to help you all achieve what you need to achieve. But the key is to include all of this in your budget. So we want you to be transparent about what you're planning to spend the money on. So as long as you include it in your budget, and I will go over the budget section of the application in a bit. Just be sure to be transparent and clear about what you're planning to spend the money on.
Yeah. And then the impact would be expected to be measured by the end of the grant, or can we provide impact results after 6 months of implementation to have more accurate metrics? This is always a tricky area for grant projects because as we only have a fairly truncated timeline. It's not even a 1-year grant period, and we know that poses challenges, particularly in environmental work where you don't see the results right away. We do acknowledge that, and we do want to support all of you in reporting what you're able to in that, in the truncated timeline. And Monet will also be working with you to figure out what you can report on for the end of the grant period. And we might follow up later, sure, to see the impact of what you've done, because we know that all of this takes time. Building relationships with the people you're working with takes time, and also the actual environmental impact might take time as well. So we'll do the best we can, but I think Louisa, we will be working with each of you to create achievable plans for the time period that this grant is within, if that makes sense. And Nina or Monet, did you want to say anything or add to that?
And Monet, I've unmuted you in case.
Yeah, I just saw that. So I think we're going to talk, I think, a bit about what's expected here in a minute. But I agree. There's different types of impacts that we can measure, including obviously the longitudinal impacts, which would be 6 months or later. And I know there's interest in measuring that, but we will set you up so you can measure more short-term impacts, particularly on individual maybe thinking or suggested behaviors.
Great.
Yeah, great.
Charles has another question. Is there a possibility? And I think I want to make sure we have time to get to the next section, right?
Yeah.
So let's keep going. And Charles, we will address that question at the end. Let's keep going with the rest of the presentation.
Yeah. Great. Okay. Well, thank you all for your great questions. So now we will walk you through the application, and I'll try to do this in enough time to leave plenty of time for questions at the end. So the application includes a number of different sections, and this includes your project description, the rationale for your project, the risks and challenges that you might face, your project's outcomes, how you will monitor and evaluate your project, your timeline, and your budget. And throughout the application, please be sure to address everything that the question asks, because a couple of these questions have a couple parts. So be sure that you're addressing everything in the question, and also be sure to follow the word limits. And remember that we are here to help if you have any questions as you're going through this. And as I mentioned earlier, the project can be a brand new project, or it can be part of an ongoing program. And also, Your application will not be judged based on your ability to write in English. We know that many of you, for many of you, English is not your first language, so that will not affect your application or the competitiveness of your application. And please don't hesitate to contact us if you have any questions about any technical words or terms that we've used in this webinar. We're here to help. Okay, so the first section is your project description. And this is a general what, why, how, who of your project. And again, when you're planning out what to say, keep in mind the word limits for each question, and that can help you decide how much detail you should provide for each question. So first, describe your project's goal. What is the overall change that you hope to see as a result of your project? And then also explain why this is important. So here's a question with two parts. Explain your goal and then explain why it's important. And so your goal could be important locally or globally. Just clearly explain why this project and your overall goal are important. The next, we want you to describe the specific steps that you will take and who you'll work with. So describe what activities or steps that you will implement to reach that goal that you mentioned in the first question. So yeah, describe any activities, events, or other steps that you will take. Include as much detail as you can within this word limit. And throughout this section, throughout this question, really be clear about how you're using environmental education to reach that goal. How are you integrating learning and skill sharing and engaging people? That is particularly important for this question. And if you will be working with any key partners or collaborators or communities that are important to the success of your project, mention those in this question here as well. And also, importantly, keep in mind that your answers to this question and in your project description overall should generally align with your timeline and budget. So I would recommend that you kind of flip back and forth between those as you're developing your application to make sure that it all aligns. So next, we want you to describe your project's audience. So tell us about who your project will reach and why. And so what people will be impacted by your project and why have you chosen them? And we also want you to include a rough estimate of how many people you expect to reach, so a rough number. And this could be people that you engage through workshops or lessons or other project activities, or it could even be people that you reach through presentations where you share your project's results or progress. And again, keep in mind the word limit. And then for the fourth question, you'll want to refer back to those priority areas that we listed. And those are all listed in the application as well. And here, again, it is also important that you really be clear about how you're using environmental education specifically to address at least one of these priority areas. It could be that your project aligns with more than one of them, but it has to align with at least one. And if you have any specific questions about your project and how it aligns with these, just let us know and we can help. Okay, so next, your rationale, the rationale for your project. So first, we ask you to explain your relevant experience. So describe any of your qualifications that are particularly relevant to this project. So this could be your involvement in a specific geographic area or with an organization or a community with an environmental issue, as well as any other skills or other experiences that you have that you think will really contribute to the success of your project. And next, we want to know how this project will contribute to the long-term impact of your work. So how is this an important step towards achieving your long-term vision or goal? And the second part of this question, we also want to know how this will contribute to your growth as a leader and a professional. So just be sure to address all of that when you are answering this question. Okay, so rationale continued. Next, we want you to explain how you see yourself contributing to this grantee learning community. So we want you to explain why you think you would be a valuable and active member of this cohort. And so we hope that all grantees will be active members, will actively contribute to this community, sharing lessons learned, maybe helping out a fellow grantee if they get stuck on something in their project. So here, briefly describe how you see yourself contributing to this community. And I know that this question might be a bit vague, but I mean, this could include skills that you hope to share, or maybe just that you're really eager to learn, or specific things that you're eager to learn about. And this is a short question, only 150 word limit. So use your words wisely with this one. And for the fourth question in this section, we ask how you plan to engage with audiences beyond your original target audience. So sharing your project results is a really important part of this program. So in this question, we want to know how you will share your project results beyond the people or the audience that is impacted by your project. So this could include sharing on EE Pro, on social media, or other news outlets. And we want to help you spread the word. So feel free to think big here, and we will help you, and we will try to help make the necessary connections to make it happen. Okay, so next we ask about risks and challenges. And I understand this might be an intimidating question, but we ask this because we really want to help your project reach its greatest potential. And knowing about potential risks or challenges that will come up will really help us support you if those do arise. So we also want to see that you can look ahead and that you've really thought through your project. So being honest with this question can really actually help your application be more competitive, and we will not judge you negatively by any risks that are outside of your control. So be honest with this question. And next, your project outcomes. So we ask you to list 3 measurable outputs or outcomes. And if you are awarded a grant, we and Monet will work with you to refine these project outcomes. But we want you to start thinking through this for yourself, and think through specific outcomes from your project that you can actually measure, that are measurable, so that you can know that you're on track and achieving the impact that you want to have. And so these are the examples that we give in the application. Definitely do not feel like you have to have outcomes that are similar to these. These are just examples. But the key here is that all of these examples are measurable. With all these examples, you can measure a change in something. And that something should relate to the goals and activities that you explained in your project description. So again, everything should align. And Monet, did you have anything to add? Let me find you here. Ooh. Did I? Oh,
Happened? There we go.
Yeah.
I don't think I have anything to, I think it's going to come up in the questions here in a moment. But I would encourage everyone to go on to the NAAA webpage and look at some of the resources there about developing your outputs and outcomes that will be helpful in this first stage while you're writing the application.
Okay, great.
And maybe those links to the website, we should share those with everyone.
Yeah, we should share those. I'll go pull that and I'll add it to the chat.
Yeah, we can do it in the chat, and we can also circulate it over email.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, and I can also share those with the recording as well. Okay, great. And so kind of on the same lines, the next section is monitoring and evaluation. So building on the outcomes that you mentioned in the previous question, we want you to think through in practice how you will actually measure those throughout your project. And so be sure to think through what will actually be practical and feasible with the audience that you're working with, or the geographic situation that you're working with, or your time and your availability, or any other factors that might affect how you can measure these. So think realistically about this and what will actually be practical. And again, if you are awarded a grant, we will work with you to refine this. And I guess, Monet, was there anything else to add with this, or we'll share some links in the chat and with the recording?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. And again, thinking through what you're comfortable doing, perhaps, and also what would be great for your project. And I know for many of you, this is going to be new, so you won't be aware of all the things. But of course, there's surveys or interviews, focus groups, observations. So those are kind of the big four of what you might pull from to at least start. And then, as mentioned, we're going to do trainings in the spring. And so we'll help refine and make sure that what you choose to do does fit your project well.
Yeah, great, thanks. Yeah, so you will not be bound to these. We will work with you to refine these through the training and through ongoing support. Oh yeah, and so here are the examples these examples are in the application as well. Again, you don't feel pressured to have yours look like these. These are just examples. So next, timeline, we're almost done. So we've included a template in the application for you to provide a timeline of the major events or activities in your project. And so keep in mind that the general timeline for this program is from April 2020 to January 2021. As some of you mentioned, there might be activities that extend beyond that. If that's the case, I would recommend filling out this timeline with the activities that fall within the April to January timeframe, and maybe add a note underneath if there's any activities that might go beyond January, just so that we know what's going on, but that also won't force you to try to deal with any formatting or anything. So if you have activities that as part of this grant that might go beyond January, we encourage you to keep it within this time frame, but if that's outside of your control, just note underneath the timeline any other activities that might go on a bit longer. And of course, you can add additional rows here if you need. And we just want a general idea of how you plan to implement the project over the course of the 9 to 10 months. And so here's a rough example of how you can fill this out. Okay, and the final section is the budget. So we give you this template in the application, and we ask you to include a detailed budget that explains exactly what you would spend this grant money on. And you can also definitely add rows here as needed. And I think, as we mentioned earlier, the grant can be spent towards both project activities and personnel. So personnel would include your time or other staff time, but just be sure to indicate all of that in your budget. Be very transparent about what you plan to spend your money on. And to help boost the impact of your grant, we do encourage you to include matching funds if you can, but it's definitely not required, not a requirement. But matching funds means any additional support that you will put towards this project that comes from outside of the Changemaker grant. So matching funds could include funding that you've received from another source, or it could be in-kind support. And in-kind support is essentially time or other items or materials that have been donated to the project. So it could be volunteer time or supplies that have been donated. And so this section in the application, there's also an example of how to account for volunteer time. So follow that example, and if you have any questions, just let us know. But be sure to follow these two columns. The one column showing what you will spend the Changemaker grant money on, and the other column showing what matching funds will go to, so that we know how we know where each activity or each expense will fall. And as I mentioned earlier, try to revisit your project description while you're developing this budget, because we will be looking at that. We will be looking to see that what you've proposed matches the budget and your timeline. So be sure to make sure that those align. And here's an example, and this example is in the application as well. Okay, so with that, we've covered everything that we planned to cover, and I will share a YouTube link to this recording later today, as well as some other links for the project outcomes and the monitoring and evaluation section. And also, when you access this on YouTube, you can also add subtitles. They might not be perfect, and I might try to edit them if I can, but you can add subtitles. So if any parts were difficult to understand, I definitely encourage trying to add the subtitles and seeing if that helps. And of course, feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. But we do have some time here for questions. So please type any questions in the chat, and we will go through as many as we can now. And if we cannot get to your question, or if you just have a very specific question, you want to ask it separately, please feel free to email me. We're here to help. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We're really excited about this opportunity. So we'll give everyone a minute if you have any other questions to add into the chat.
And Nina, Charles had a question. Is there there's a lot of, just missed the question. Okay. Is there a possibility that infrastructure can be considered? The example would be Environmental Resource Center and Library. So sort of, I am assuming building costs for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't have any restrictions on what you can spend the grant on. The key is just to be transparent about what you plan to spend the money on, and also somewhere at the application, make sure that it's clear why that's important. So why that's a key part of your program. Make sure to mention that in the project description. It's important that you, explain that why that expense or why that part of the project is essential to the success of your project.
Yeah, and it's all about environmental education. So how are you working with people, and who are they? And that is a big component of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love this picture.
It's so good.
Yeah, it's a great picture. So this is a photo of someone is using a marker on it. I see little.
Oh.
I wonder if you can.
Not me.
Cool.
I don't know.
This is at our last conference. Our scholarship recipients and our panelists were all together, all 30 under 30. Some of you here on this call are in this picture. It's a great one.
Okay, well,
Yeah, looks like that's it for questions.
yeah. Yeah, I guess so. So I guess if you have any questions, there's no such thing as a silly question. Feel free to email me. You have my contact information. And I will be sending a recording. And also if any of this is confusing or if any of the terminology was confusing, I'm also happy to clarify that. This is a really exciting opportunity, but it is quite an extensive application. So we're definitely happy to help. So yeah, great. Well, you will hear from me shortly with the recording as well as link to some resources. And thanks all for joining.
Great. Yeah, thanks everybody.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Save the chat. Ooh. Did I stop recording? Oh, stop share. Ugh.